This is me. Well, this was me in the year 2014 to be exact. And this is my late grandfather, Darryl Dugas, 1 year prior to his death. And this is where the story begins. My grandfather was immensely interested in his own ancestry. He had done a lot of research on his own accord and had even uncovered some information that made my search that much easier. According to him, we were related to Richard Warren of 1578, who had arrived in the New World in 1620 aboard the Mayflower, and was one of the signers of the Mayflower Compact. And also, according to him, the Dugas family could be traced all the way back to France. But was this correct? The answer is yes, and this is why. I began the search for answers with my grandmother, his widow, and his daughter, my mother. The three of us were quite keen to get started, and luckily my grandmother had all the information we would need. From several totes, she withdrew dozens of old, tattered photographs, birth certificates, death certificates, a genealogy record of the Dugas family, and a record of the Witham and Warren families. The search would rely on my great-grandparents, Charles Dugas and Dorothy Witham, the parents of Darryl. Let's begin with Charles. Charles Dugas was born in 1916 and grew up during the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression. This was him, and his high school football team in the year 1932. And according to the photograph, the team only scored one touchdown that season. And this is his high school graduating class. According to his death certificate, his father's name was Thomas Dugas, and from there we were able to use the genealogy record to trace the name all the way back to the beginning. According to the record, the first Dugas that all can trace their lineage to is Abraham Dugas. He settled in Port Royal in the French colony of Acadia around 1640. His ancestors were originally from Lyon, France, and the family name was originally Crinier. In the 17th century, a member of the family was distinguished for bravery in the armed forces and was made a Knight of St. Louis and received from the king a vast domain called the Domain of Gas. Thus, they took the name of Crinier du of Gas. This eventually was written as Dugas, and finally Dugas. Following the genealogy record, Thomas's father was Isaiah Dugas, Isaiah's father was Pierre Dugas, and his father was Hippolyte Dugas, and his father was named Joseph Dugas. Interestingly, according to the record, Joseph and his siblings were exiled, quote-unquote, from the area of Acadia, which is now Quebec, Maine, and eastern Canada, to Boston in the mid-18th century before later returning. Finally, the connection of Joseph to Abraham is through Abraham's daughter Claude. She, along with her brother, form the main two branches of the Dugas family. So with that, I can actually confirm I can trace the Dugas name all the way back to France. Next is Dorothy Witham, my great-grandmother. She was born around 1917, and according to my mother, she was one of the first female postmasters in the state of Maine. Dorothy, along with her husband Charles, who were the parents of Darryl, my grandfather, moved to Pontiac, Michigan in the 1950s in order to seek work with the growing auto industry. Charles would eventually go on to work for Pontiac Motors. Luckily, I was able to find Dorothy's parents through her death certificate, Daniel Lester Witham and Gladys Maud Teed. This is where we had a breakthrough. Someone, sometime, had already done research into the link between the Withams and the Warrens. Whether this was my grandfather or other parts of the family, we were not sure. My grandmother did not tell us that it was his handwriting, but we weren't sure of anybody else who had done the research. We spent hours trying to find who the Warren was and where they fitted into the tree, when we finally noticed something on one of the lists. We found that the mother of Daniel Lester Witham was Eunice Elizabeth Warren. Now that we had a name, we found it on the Warren family list that we had. Using that and online databases, we were able to directly trace this Eunice Warren all the way back to Richard Warren of 1578. Starting with Eunice Elizabeth Warren, we went to Richard Warren Jr., then to Richard Warren of 1754, John Warren of 1719, to his father John Warren of 1689, then his father Richard Warren of 1646, and then finally Nathaniel Warren of 1624, who was the son of the Richard Warren who came over on the Mayflower. If my math is correct, that makes Richard Warren, the man who came over on the Mayflower and was a signer of the Mayflower Compact, my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great, that's 10 greats, grandfather. And with that, the search was complete. We had finally fulfilled the search that my grandfather never completed. He had never understood exactly how far back the Dugas family went, and he had never found out exactly how we were related to Richard Warren. But now, thanks to the work of me, my mother, and my grandmother, we know. And that is the end of the story, for now. I hope this journey was intriguing, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.